And I think we're in.
We are.
So, good morning, good afternoon to everybody that is joining us. Thank you for taking time out of what I'm sure are very, very busy days to be here. We're going to give it a few more minutes for people to filter in before we really start getting into it. But I wanted to say hi and welcome. My name is Eric Kowalczyk. For those of you who don't know me, I am one of the founders and the CEO of Connection Point, and I am joined today by the incomparable, internationally renowned, and highly sought after Judy Powell, who will be doing this with me.
Good,
Judy, I don't know if you
good
want to say.
afternoon, everybody.
I think that's a remarkable way to introduce you because anybody who knows you knows that every word of that was true. So today, what we wanted to do and to bring to everyone is an adaptation of how we approach crisis communication, but specific for hurricane season. Hurricane season is upon us. There is a storm forming in the Atlantic Ocean as we speak. And so this felt both timely and really, really important as we see how critical communication is during any crisis, certainly one where millions of people are potentially going to be impacted. The stakes in crisis is that much higher. And so we felt it really important to be able to bring this to everyone. And the reality is we could talk about this probably for a week straight. Hurricanes are such a large, massive, all-consuming, resource-draining, significant event that we could probably do a week on this. And so our goal today is not to equip you with every little thing that you would ever possibly need in a hurricane or in any crisis situation. What we're trying to do today is to really give you some very high-level strategic thinking points, some best practices, a little bit of a walkthrough in what's happened in other scenarios where communication maybe didn't go as well as it could have during a hurricane, and how to really move your community through recovery if you're unfortunately in the situation where a devastating hurricane happens. And so that's what we're going to do today. I want to tell you a little bit about Connection Point, a little bit about Judy and I, our background. Then we're going to get into it. We're going to walk through some really, really useful information about how to prepare for a hurricane or any natural disaster, how to communicate during that storm, some post-recovery messaging, and you'll see weaved in throughout here some of the things that we've seen from the past that maybe aren't as effective anymore, and ways to reconsider how you're doing your communication. And we're going to leave time at the end so that everybody has the ample opportunity to ask questions if they have them. There will be a Q&A box that you can put your questions into, and we'll just work through them when we get to that section. A little bit about Connection Point. We are a battle-tested team, and battle-tested is the right phrase, of communicators and marketers. Joining behind the scenes, helping to facilitate all of this, are two of our wonderful partners, Christina, who is our COO, and Mike, who is our Chief Growth Officer, working behind the scenes to help facilitate this. We have the team spread out all across the country with offices in California, Texas, Tennessee, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey. We all bring a really deep background in communications, working for nonprofits, NGOs, government organizations, for-profit organizations, international organizations, and we bring our heart and our passion to this, which is why we wanted to bring this to all of you. We care deeply about the efficacy of communications and making sure that your message is being heard by the people who need to hear it. So a little bit about Judy and I, and then I'm going to turn this over to her because her voice is far better than mine, and I feel like I've talked enough already for today. Between the two of us, we have more than 60 years of crisis communication experience. I'm not going to go through the bullet points. You can see them up there. That's just a small sampling. What I can tell you is that we've worked at every level of government, from small municipalities of 3,000 people all the way up to international organizations, handled just about every type of crisis you can possibly imagine. And so that experience you'll see sprinkled throughout our presentation in terms of best practice, things that we've seen that we know that work. But we've also built this on a deep bench of science, and you're going to see that as well. Judy, anything you want to add to this?
No, I think that was a fabulous introduction. I just think that folks need to realize that, and I know every communicator that is on this call knows that that crisis is a matter of if, or sorry, a matter of when, not a matter of if. So we're really thrilled that you joined us, and we hope that you're going to find the next hour or so, or a couple hours, helpful.
Great. And with that, we're going to dive right in. So, Judy's going to start us off with things to be thinking about before any crisis ever happens, but particularly a slow moving, evolving crisis like a hurricane.
Yeah, there's some very, very unique things that you need to be considering, and I'm really hoping if you're actually watching this webinar, you already realize that we have to do the continual learning. And there's things that we can do before the bad thing happens to prepare ourselves to make us look much better for when the thing happens. Our goal at the end of the day is to keep our community safe and also to build trust and legitimacy within our agency. So whether you're a fire department, a police department, emergency management service, a government agency, there are really different roles each one of you play in prepping for a crisis. But honestly, and Eric and I will talk about this throughout the presentation, working together as a JIC, as a joint information group, becomes extraordinarily important. And doing this preparation is super helpful for all of us working together. So let's talk about some basic communication truths. First of all, and again, something that I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on, is the fact that communication really is one of the most important roles you as a leader or your leader will maintain during a crisis. People need to see from leadership. They need to see leadership speaking. They need to see leadership in front. Yes, as a PIO, you might be doing briefings and you might be doing updates, but please know that people do need to see leadership out front. The second point there is I actually get from a dear friend of mine who was the chief of the Boston Police Department, Dan Linsky. He dealt with the Boston Marathon bombing. And he talks a lot about people who just took leadership roles. They had no titles. He had one officer that essentially took the lead at the scene. And he was often asked, well, why, once you got there, chief, why didn't you take over? He goes, he was doing exactly what I need to do. So crisis calls for solutions, not procedures. We love in public safety falling back on we're going to check our policies and procedures. During a crisis, yeah, they're looking for what's the solution? How do we move forward? So, as a PIO, as a communicator, as a leader, get out there and lead. Do what needs to be done. And the last point, again, is something that I think you all know. Trusted leaders that become that face of whatever that incident is, they can totally help frame where it's going. They can move people past the crisis and help people move forward. And at the end of the day, that's our goal, is to move our community from being victimized by something bad that happened to being survivors of what happened. So, moving on for our just some other basic truths, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Things are changing. I'm seeing a lot more people saying, "Okay, you know what? We do have to talk about this." But both Eric and I have been in this business long enough when it was, we're not going to say anything until we know everything. In that beautiful quote there from John Miller, right? No comment, never stop the story. They're not going, the media and the general public are not going to stop talking about it simply because you've chosen not to. And what happens when you choose not to speak? That void is filled. It's like taking your finger out of a glass of water. Everything's going to fill in. So you're going to have false narratives. And with social media and AI generated imagery, you're going to have people creating pictures. I live in Southeast Tennessee. So when the hurricane came through the Carolinas and Northeast Tennessee, we saw all kinds of pictures that did not exist. So that was false narratives that were being created. And people in your community, and especially of those that have limited ability to communicate because of the hurricane, if they don't know what the truth is, they're going to be very easily swayed by what they see because we believe with our eyes. So when people see these fake images, they're going to start believing them. And then obviously, we all know that the media enjoys spinning narratives that are going to cause that fear, anger, and ongoing controversy. So again, if you don't have a speaking role or a voice there, those loud voices are going to take over very quickly. And what we found in the last probably 5 years or so, employees are becoming much more emboldened to speak out. So now we have employees that if the agency is not speaking with a coordinated voice, employees are more than happy to come out and lead that charge. And sometimes they're saying the right things, but remember, if you have an employee that sits here in your agency and they don't see the big picture, information they're putting out could be incorrect as well. So let's take a look at some of our stakeholders. No matter what crisis we're dealing with, hurricane, natural disaster, officer malfeasance, or employee malfeasance, you really have to take a few minutes to think about who your stakeholders are. So obviously, your agency and the agencies involved is going to be a stakeholder. And please understand the difference between stakeholders and audiences. There really, truly is a difference. Stakeholders are people that have a stake in what's happening. Audiences are folks that are simply watching on the periphery. It's not affecting them so much. But when you think about who your stakeholders are, yes, your agencies, obviously your community and your employees. Sometimes we forget about our employees because we're so busy trying to communicate outwardly, we forget about internal communication. Let's not forget that our employees have their own web of communicators, loved ones, family, friends that are reaching back to them. Oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? If we don't provide information to them, they're not going to know what to tell their web of informers. Elected officials obviously need to be part of planning, organizing, and communicating during the thing. Media is one that we all think of. Oh, yeah, obviously they're there. And any involved parties. And I use the term involved parties to mean victims. And the reason I don't use the word victims is oftentimes people look at the word victim and they go, oh, the person that is directly affected. But what I want you to think about is in the case of a hurricane or a natural disaster, just because my house wasn't flooded, or just because I still have power, you know, 10 blocks away from people that don't have power, I'm still being affected. This is still affecting me psychologically, physiology. And so when I talk about involved parties, I want you to think about that. This is huge. And again, this is something that it's really important for us to keep in mind when we are talking about victims that are directly affected by that natural disaster. We very quickly are tempted to provide facts. And that's all well and good, and it needs to be done. But as you can see by that, facts whisper and emotions scream. So when the bad thing is happening, people's emotions are very, very high. And for you to get your messages across, you have to acknowledge the emotion that's involved. If you don't, if you or your principal, whoever is speaking, your leader is out front simply talking facts, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, people are sitting at home going, but I'm scared, but I'm terrified, but I don't have a house. I don't know where to go. I don't know where my loved ones are. That is what people are listening to. And that also is what the media is listening to. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. So when it comes to the stakeholders and audiences, as we're putting together our plans, and we'll talk about that a bit later in this presentation, you need to be thinking about what would be great for me to have in my hand when the bad thing happens. And one of the key things is how are we going to communicate with all these different stakeholders and audiences? Because oftentimes in a hurricane, and many of you that are on this webinar have probably experienced them, your traditional forms of communication are gone. And we've made jokes about, what are we doing? Are we doing, Braille? Are we doing, what are we doing? How are we going to get a hold of people here? Doing what's always been done before isn't always doing what's actually needed. So understanding and taking time to think about, man, we usually don't have family liaisons, or we usually don't plan out in advance where we're going to put the media. So I worked in Savannah, and we obviously get a lot of hurricanes. And we had a hurricane coming to town, coming up the coast. It was going to be there in 5 or 6 or 7 days. And CNN, because they like coming to Savannah, because it's a great city, they phoned us and said, "Hey, we're coming down." I said, "We don't even know if the hurricane's going to hit." And they were like, "Well, yeah, but we're coming. Where do you want us to, where do you want us to set up our giant, 18-wheeler trucks?" And my firefighter PIO and I are looking at the giant map. And those of you that are in hurricane areas know what I'm talking about, flood zone maps. And of course, Matt Stanley, who is my fire PIO, who always brings levity to a scene, he goes, "Judy, right there, flood level 1, that's where we're putting CNN." It's like, no, we can't do that. But this is where we really can start using more and more technology. And whoever is your cell carrier, you guys should be in contact with them. Are they going to be able to show up with cows and cats and or cows and I forget the other one, cows and something to start helping provide internet service, to start helping provide things so you can do that. And then obviously, and I think this is something that we all understand, understanding that we need to provide ASL, we need to provide perhaps your messaging in different languages depending on your community. And this is why it's so important for us to consider our stakeholders before the thing happens. The other thing, and this is super important, I'm sure you've all, maybe not because I'm old, there was an old fable about a young boy who cried wolf all the time. And when the wolf actually showed up, nobody listened to Peter because Peter had been calling that there was a wolf. By the way, Eric, just so you know, we ran into a bear this morning on my walk.
Of course
And
you did.
bear, but my dog chased it, so that was good. Here's the thing. We have to start thinking about what messaging is going to resonate because there's something called message fatigue, right? People are now hearing, and what people see in the media is the spaghetti maps. So I see the spaghetti maps of 40 different hurricanes coming up the coast. Run for your lives, run for your lives, the hurricane's coming. You're like, there's 40 strings of the hurricane map, and one of them is coming my way. I'm done. So if this is an imminent threat, we actually have to start thinking about what messaging is actually going to get through. You know that, who pays attention to the tornado sirens if you're in the Midwest, because we practice them every Tuesday at noon, the tornado siren goes off. So over time, we just become desensitized to it. So that same thing happens with our messaging. So again, the same messaging that we put out might not be working. So what can we do? Three things that we want you to consider, and you'll come to the understanding if you've seen Eric and I before or by the end of this presentation that we're very big on three. Why? Because people can remember three things. The predictable messaging, the stuff that you're going to have to say, that's going to get through the clutter of, oh, this is, it's another drill, right? This is why this is not a drill happens, right? This is serious. Evacuate now. Your life is at risk. That's very different than hurricanes coming, take your evacuation route. People are going to go, what? Oh, oh, this might be the real thing. The second thing I want you to consider when you're creating your messaging is what we talk about is activate helpfulness. People want to help. People want something to do. And we want to give people something to do because it takes you from a position of being, I'm a victim of this natural disaster, to I'm a survivor. This is what I can do to help myself, my loved ones, my family, and other people in my community. So if you
That moment when the crisis happens in the middle of your webinar and your co-host's
right?
internet freezes.
I'm sorry?
You froze in the middle of activate helpfulness. So we had an actual communications crisis in the middle of our webinar. It was great. I was stepping in for you as your backup, but it's all good. You were in the middle of
Okay.
activate helpfulness.
Do I need to start there again? I apologize. I'm in the mountains of Tennessee and this happens. Um, by activating, and you probably all see me doing weird things. By activating helpfulness, what I'm asking you to do is going from feeling like a victim, right? So what we want to do is activate our community from feeling victimized by this hurricane to putting them in a position of, I'm a survivor, I'm helping. And not only can I can do this to help my family and my loved ones, but this is what I can do to help my neighbor. And we as a group can get through this together. This is why the words like Boston Strong, Vegas Stronger. This is why these things resonate, because it's us working together. And that actually ties in with the last point there, the social good accountability. What we're allowed to do is saying, you know what, by you doing this, you're helping us, the first responders, help your neighbors, help everyone get through this together. So think about your messaging very carefully and think about how you can incorporate those three different ways to think about your messaging. Change the predictable messaging, activate their helpfulness, and then talk about this is what you can do that's going to lead you better with social good. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and I doubt you will have the same glitches that I do, my friend.
Nor will I have bears in my backyard, but we'll muddle through regardless. What we're trying to get across this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you're watching us from, is that yes, some of the tried and true messaging works. There's a reason that it continues to be used, but it's no longer as effective as we would like it to be. There is an evolution in communication, there's an evolution in messaging, as you're about to see, and that incorporating a slightly altered approach, seeing people in your community not as a flat wall that you have to communicate messaging to, but active partners that can help you to be good message spreaders, that can help you as a resource in the unfolding of a crisis. This is where we're moving, particularly, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, particularly because we all have a cell phone. We've moved past the point now of talking about social media as though it's this thing external to our lives. Social media and the way that we communicate on our cell phones is as incorporated into our lives as really anything else that we do. And so this reframing of messaging is really about activating your community, because the crisis is coming, and whether it's a hurricane or it's some other event, a crisis is only, as Judy said, not a matter of if, but when. And so thinking through some of these pre-thoughts about how you're setting yourself up to be effective in the crisis is really important. For an event like a hurricane, where this is not just the event takes place and then you're responding in that type of a crisis mode, this is an elongated crisis. There's multiple days, possibly multiple weeks, that are going to be involved in this. And so as we walk through actually managing the crisis and setting up your messaging, what we're going to be talking about is at that 60,000 foot level, but you may have to be amending your messaging as you go through to navigate, because the way that we talk about crisis is very different from how it used to be. Not that I want to be the guy that says back in my day, but back in my day, when the incident took place, whatever it was, whether it was a hurricane that was coming, a car accident, a shooting, whatever it was, the incident would happen. And it was a very sort of predictable linear path that would take place, where an incident happens and then the agency finds out because someone has called 911 or an officer or first responder sees the incident on view. They handle the incident. Perhaps the media learns about it because they're listening to a scanner, or someone has called the newsroom, or the agency has time to put together all of their facts into a nice, neat news release and sends it out to the media. And then the media does a really good job of factually and accurately reporting without any distortion or agenda of that information to the public. That's 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 how it used to be. And there was a time when we would talk about this as part of the normal daily flow, and that crisis would be very different. That's not the case anymore. In the world that we operate, whether it's a crisis or a normal incident, the incident takes place and everybody finds out all at the same time. The public finds out, you're getting calls as social media and text messages are flowing out. The media is scrolling and they're picking up, their data mining on social media, and they're picking up on the incident, they're listening to your scanners. everybody finds out all at once. The difference between the old flow and the way that information flows today is that whereas before you had some time, a little bit of time, to carefully put your package of information and gather all of the facts and have a nice chronology put together and get that out through that linear passageway. Now the public is immediately looking to you, within seconds looking to you to see what's happening, and so is the media. If you think about what happened last week in Minneapolis, horrible, horrible event. When we do normal crisis communication training, one of the things that both Judy and I say all the time is that if your organization does not have a crisis communication plan that includes a school shooting, you are way behind where you need to be. You absolutely have to have a crisis communication plan that covers school shootings. If you were watching local news like I was in Minneapolis, within 30 minutes of the incident happening, before any information is out there, the media was already starting to question why MPD wasn't putting out more information. Why weren't they getting more active information from? And they're saying that to everybody that's watching it on TV. That shifts public opinion. Everybody's going to look to you for the answers, for what they need to do, for what they need to know. So you have to be thinking about that constantly throughout any situation that's unfolding, is that you're going to be that source of truth that Judy talked about. You're going to be that place that people come to for information, and it's going to happen very, very quickly. And I want to show you sort of how that evolves through a crisis situation. It always starts with surprise. That's the very nature of a crisis, right? We don't know necessarily that it's coming. And with a hurricane, there's a bit of surprise, right? Like the storm forms in the ocean, there wasn't a storm, and now there's a storm. The surprise element there is that we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what the path is going to be. We don't know how strong it's going to be. And that fear, that uncertainty just amplifies day after day as your meteorologists and all of your TV stations come on screen and they start talking about, we don't know quite where it's going to be, but don't worry, we have reporters on every beach for the next 60 miles. And they're going to show you with yardsticks how high the water might be with a 14-foot storm surge. They're keeping that element of surprise going. The next part of that crisis is insufficient information. And a lot of you that are watching right now or will watch this know this feeling. You get the phone call that, hey, X event has happened. There's a shooting, there's been a home invasion, there's a horrible car accident, and you're getting bits and pieces of information. You don't necessarily have enough to start communicating. And this is no different in a hurricane for all of the reasons that I was just talking about. That spaghetti map that Judy mentioned, right? We're all very familiar seeing and being prepped with the idea we don't really know where this is going to go. We don't fully understand how bad the storm surge is going to be. We don't know where the tides are going to be as the storm is coming in. All of these variables that make accurate information delivery very, very challenging. In any crisis, the event is going to escalate. The totality of the circumstances is going to overwhelm your resources and ability to handle the crisis situation, and will very likely overwhelm your ability to communicate as thoroughly and as efficiently as you want. That's just what's going to happen. And we don't have to talk about a hurricane here. Go to any crisis situation that you've handled and think about that, right? The event unfolds, you get that notification, maybe it's a radio call, perhaps you're driving to the scene or you're in your office and you're trying to manage that flow of information, and then the information you're getting in that second phase is inaccurate or missing pieces, and then information starts to flood in like crazy and you're getting mixed messages and different stories, and now parents are starting to show up and the media is calling you. The event is escalating beyond your ability to control it. And when that happens, invariably in any crisis situation, there is a loss of control. You don't have control of the scene. You don't have control of the actors on the ground. You don't have control over the hurricane and where the hurricane is going to go. You have lost control of the situation. That's just a normal part of the crisis. And I want to say that again. That is a normal part of the crisis. For any of you who have lived through them, you know there's this moment where you kind of step outside of yourself and you go, is this really happening? Is this really what's taking place right now? And it feels like somebody's got the goalposts that you were marching towards. They've put it on wheels and they're charging down the field with it. And you don't know how long it's going to take you to get there. Be okay in that space. You're not alone. This is the natural arc of a crisis when you lose control. What I do want you to be aware of, and what we really want to impress upon you, is that there's going to come a moment when intense scrutiny starts. And there's two components of this that I want to talk about with intense scrutiny that are really, really important. And we used to talk about it just from a media perspective, right? Because the media would be the one looking at the decisions that you're making, that you made leading up to the incident, that you're making after the incident is over, and reporting on them and shaping public opinion. But just as the old flow of information doesn't hold true anymore, it's not just the media shaping public opinion anymore. Your entire community and the social media forums that they use, whether it's Nextdoor, I'll just let that sit there for a minute for those of you that deal with Nextdoor on a daily basis, whether it's Nextdoor or other social media apps that shall remain nameless, your public is shaping opinion in real time as much as the media is. And they're going to be making value-based decisions and statements about what you're doing. That's really, really important. And I want to just reemphasize that point. They're going to be making value-based statements. X police department should have done this. The city should have warned us about this. Why didn't the mayor let us know that X was going to happen? These are all value-based statements. And these value-based statements, once somebody makes a value-based statement, it's really hard to shift them off of that. It's almost impossible. So you need to be aware that this is coming, that as the crisis is unfolding, the decisions that you're making, how you're communicating those decisions to your public, you are pre-shaping their value-based decisions that they're going to make when it happens. You have the ability to influence that. There's two other parts of this that I want to talk about, and I like to refer to these as the fatal flaws. They're predictable. We have case studies that could fill an entire file cabinet about these two, and these are the things that long after the crisis is over are almost always what come back to bite the organization, destroy public trust, reduce credibility and effectiveness as you move forward. The first is short-term focus. And my favorite example of this is that if you have ever been in a meeting and someone has said the phrase, "Don't worry about that now, we'll deal with it later," that's short-term focus. And while I can't see any of you right now, I have to imagine that at least half of you had a smile on your face thinking about that example, because we've all been in that meeting. We've all had that moment where you go, no, we have to talk about it right now. Short-term focus is literally trying to get to the next step. It's thinking about how do we move just one foot in front of the other. As a communications professional, you've got to be the person in the room who can step back from that, see the whole picture, understand the ramifications of the decisions that are being made, not just in the immediate time, but what is it going to look like 30 days from now? What's it going to look like 6 months from now? What's it going to look like a year from now when you know all of the 1-year anniversary stories are going to come out? What are they going to talk about? What are they going to say about you and the decisions that you made? The second fatal flaw is siege mentality. And some of you have probably experienced this, where the bombarding of media requests and public attacks feels literally like you're being attacked. And so what happens is everybody starts to circle the wagons. They retreat into their walled off perimeter, and they say, you know what, we're not talking to anybody. And those siege mentality statements, you'll hear them with phrases like, we don't have enough information to say anything yet. We need to gather more facts before we can say anything yet. Here's the thing about being in a crisis. There is no perfect time to talk. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good. We're going to get into this in a little bit here about what you can say. You want to talk about what you know, facts, what you know, when you know it. Because as you look at this crisis arc, your community is going to be looking to you for information, for what they need to be doing, for how they need to be doing it. I want to show you what this looks like with a hurricane that took place recently within the last couple of years. It was Hurricane Ian happened in 2022. It was the fifth strongest storm to strike the United States. It had 150 deaths that were attributed to it. It was the most deadly hurricane to hit the state of Florida since 1935. That's really important, that point. Most deadly since 1935. There's this expectation that in today's day and age, we don't have these sort of deaths from a hurricane because we're prepared, we're ready to go. And so that number played a big role in some of the coverage after. $113 billion in damage. It was the third costliest storm to ever strike the United States. 4 million people left without power, 2.5 million evacuations. This was a monster storm that came through. And as you think about that crisis arc that I showed you, it started with surprise. The course changed rapidly and dramatically. People were unprepared for where it actually made impact. This is the surprise element. You have all of those micro surprises that we talked about, right? The spaghetti map, the reporter standing on the beaches across Florida, across the Gulf states, saying it might hit here, it might hit here, here's what it's going to look like, keeping that surprise moving. And then at the last minute, it actually does change course and you have an additional layer of surprise and not enough information. This was a real challenge for the emergency management officials all across the Gulf region, trying to figure out how to safely evacuate people, trying to think about, do we over-alarm certain communities or not? Do we risk shutting down the ability of communities that will be impacted by pre-evacuating other areas and clogging up the highways? It made it very, very difficult to make some of those decisions and communicate some of those decisions effectively to communities that were going to be in the path of this hurricane. And it escalated very quickly. It went into one of the most powerful storms that's ever hit the United States almost overnight because of the turbocharged effect that happened in the Gulf. And so you can see this storm that's coming in, we don't quite know where it's going to be, and it changes course very quickly, and there's not enough information to be able to talk about what's happening and make the decisions you need to make. And then out of nowhere, it escalates and becomes this massive storm, and agencies lost control. And there's one quote in here from this article that I really want to point your attention to, which is, how do you plan for something like this? You try your best and you wing it. We did our best at getting the resources we could to share with all of the cities. I want you to imagine that you are one of the people that was directly affected by this storm, that you lived in one of the either neighborhoods that had been completely wiped out or had been flooded, or you live in a community that experienced deaths, or you were just otherwise affected by the power loss or the traffic or whatever it was. And your public safety officials are telling you, we didn't know what we were doing, we had to make it up. This isn't to critique them. This is to talk about that emotional impact that Judy started speaking about at the very, very beginning. Your words matter. How you convey information matters. And as we get into this, we're going to talk about how important it is that your community feels like you got this no matter what's happening. They lost control. And this is where we see the intense scrutiny really ramp up. It was already all over social media. You can go back and just put Hurricane Ian into one of the search bars and you can see the messaging that was out there. But the media begins to focus on process. Why were the orders given that were given? Why were these the evacuation routes that were chosen? Aha, people died that didn't need to happen, and we did the investigation so you can trust us because we're completely unbiased and we're bringing you non-sensational news stories that won't drive web traffic to increase revenue for us. And we're going to tell you that these deaths were preventable. Sorry, I had to get that in there. The intense scrutiny was real. This is one of dozens and dozens and dozens of headlines that we could have dropped in here. It's real. They're going to look at the decisions that you made. They're going to look at how you communicated. A lot of these stories really focused on what was being said to the public, when it was being said, what the public was being told. Examples of that short-term focus. And this really came down to the cone and the evacuation paths. and people were making decisions in the moment of what that cone was saying at the time that it was saying it, without taking into account the broader impacts of that it might shift, that it might intensify, that it might decrease, and what the ramifications of that would be. And we see that in the seventh one, the siege mentality. And I just want to draw your attention to this top line here. Brushing off criticism when the death toll continues to climb won't go down well with the public. They put that out there because they felt like public officials were brushing them off, were not answering the questions that they had. The message that they're sending to the public is your elected officials, your public safety officials aren't telling us what really happened here. This is what siege mentality looks like. And so if you think about that whole arc from surprise all the way through siege mentality, there are communication moments at each stage that you have the opportunity to be able to provide effective messaging, that with the right pre-planning and the right pre-staging of information, you can start to manage that arc effectively so that you're not on the receiving end of this type of coverage. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Judy to actually talk about managing the crisis effectively.
Yeah, the one analogy I'll use for siege mentality, which has become my favorite, because none of you will ever forget this, that's the Homer Simpson backing into the bushes. We've seen that, and, and that's what happens. So by understanding those seven stages of the crisis, one, you can advise your principal, whoever your leadership is, that, okay, yeah, don't freak out. This is the next step, because no boss ever wants to lose control, but it is an inevitable step, and say, oh, it's okay. Right now, you do not have control of this, but what we can do is we can manage our message and we can manage this moving forward. The challenge, and what's really good again for you guys to understand and know, is that while we're going through these seven stages of a crisis, our media is going through three. And they don't mesh up particularly well with the amount of information's coming that's going to come in. Next bad thing that happens across the country, just follow along. It's like following along the bouncing ball. You will see this exact thing happen. So the bad thing happens, whether it's a hurricane or other natural disaster or whatever it is. First of all, the media is going to provide facts. They're going to want to be there. They're going to know what happened, how many people are dead, how many people are without power. All that stuff is great, but they're looking for that information when you're stuck not knowing that information. So we call it the evidence gap, right? So the desire for information's up here, but what you really know for a fact is down here. And this is where you can get into trouble when you start saying, well, we think. As soon as you say, I think, nobody cares. Nobody cares what you think. What do you know? And this has gotten people in trouble in a lot of situations. Think back to Uvalde, right? We had a chief of police and we actually had a governor saying, well, our guys went in right away and the teacher left the door open. And it comes to be none of that was true because they were speaking with, well, that's our protocol, that's our policy. They were speaking when they had insufficient information. The media wants to get away from the facts as soon as they can and go to emotion because emotion is what gets people to watch TV. If I can get crying people on air, if I can get angry people on air, if I can get people that are going to create divisiveness, especially amongst the responding agencies, that's great television. That's great social media. That's what goes viral. And at that point, that's typically when your event is escalating and you're losing your ability to control what's happening. And you're probably losing management of your narrative a little bit. And again, let your people know, hey, this is where we're going. Now it's our job to rein it in and reframe the narrative. And I never talk about controlling narratives because you can't control unless you're paying. What you can do is manage. Manage the narrative, manage your mouth, manage your message. And then the media will go to who do we blame, right? This is when people, not just traditional news media, people on social media, influencers are walking around with two name tags. One of them says you're the good guy, one of them says you're the bad guy. Sometimes you have to actually stand up and say, we're the bad guys. Put it right here. And that's scary, and your legal counsel will say never do that, but sometimes that's how you end a crisis. But a lot of times the media are the ones that are going to say, "Oh, here's the bad guy, here's the good guy." With your messaging, you can really help direct that. But this is often the time when your bosses or your management is doing the Homer Simpson fade in the bushes. Let's just not say anything. You're missing a fabulous opportunity then to ensure where the media is going with this story is going in the right place. So let's look at this again. If you can predict it, you can plan for it, right? So when you look at these different things, look at what's happening here. First thing I'm going to do, this is what happened. Here's the hurricane. This is what's happening. Millions of people in the dark. This is a horrible thing. Here's all the facts. 2.5 million people. Then we're going to start going towards emotion, right? Strongest hurricane, catastrophic flooding. Oh, this is horrible. All these people are trapped. Be very worried. Be very afraid. This is so sad. Showing crying people, showing fake pictures of the girl on the boat with her dog. We all saw that one, which was AI generated. And then we're going to blame. What went wrong? Who can we blame? What can we learn? Actually, I give them credit for saying, what can we learn? Because we do all ask that question. But they want to take that bad guy name tag and stick it somewhere because the public, our communities truly understand. And as someone who was in media for 5 years, we were told over and over again as a reporter, people understand good guy, bad guy stories. So almost all of our stories were what's the good, what's the bad, let's see if we can pit them against each other. That's how these things work. So let's take a look at how we're managing these crises, especially from a communications standpoint. Eric said it best, right? Talk about what you know when you know it. Long gone are the days that, and I know for those of you that work in law enforcement, especially your homicide detectives, your major crimes people, and your people that do internal affairs, do not want to tell you anything until they have it all wrapped up in a nice box with a bow and say, "Here, you can do this now." You can't do that. Because if we don't get ahead of the messaging, as I was saying earlier, that void will be filled. So speed actually matters. If we are mute, if we don't say anything, people are going to lose confidence in you and they're going to find other people to trust. Second, those lovely subject matter experts. There are a few really good ones out there. Don't get me wrong. I worked for one. Bill Bratton is amazing, and Chuck Ramsey is amazing. But some of the people, as long as you had the words FBI or NYPD or Miami-Dade fire after you're an expert. There's going to be subject matter experts commenting on your incident with zero knowledge of the incident itself, your community, your policies and procedures, but they're going to talk about it because they're either being paid or they like the attention and they like being on television. So we gotta be aware of that. That's going to fill that void. And lastly, technology. It's interesting, and Eric, please feel free to chime in on that. Um, the amount of information that we need to be putting out is crazy. And I know, Eric, when you guys during the Freddie Gray riots, you were messaging, remind
Once a
me,
minute. Once a
once a
minute.
minute.
Yeah.
The reason we do that is because people will tend to follow a hashtag in a bad incident. And what happens is your messaging is dying in that feed. No one is going to sit there and look at their phone and do this for 3 minutes trying to find a message from whoever's in charge. So your messaging has to be constant to stay on top of the feeds. So repeating your message, good thing, and think beyond just social media. Who are influencers you can be talking to? Many of you probably have, community academies where people come in and they learn about your agency. How can we get information to them? How can we get information, yes, to our traditional media? How can we reach out to the schools that have great ways to reach everybody? How about your faith-based agencies? If you have a mega church in your city, almost guaranteed they have more followers than you do on your site. So this is where we have to start thinking outside the box.
Judy, can I
What?
just say one thing about SMEs?
Please.
Because I
Yeah.
never missed the opportunity to talk about this. Um, the there are those good credible sources that come out, but there are also the people who just happen to have certain initials after their name that get paid money to go on and talk about crisis du jour. My favorite example of this, and if you reach out to me after this presentation, I will happily link you to the video, is during the San Bernardino terrorist attack that took place. There was a lack of information that was coming out, and so the media began the very predictable speculation arc that they go through. And one of their subject matter experts, former law enforcement, said on TV, have it on video, happy to send it to you, it is very probable that the reason the San Bernardino Police Department wasn't putting out information, or Sheriff's Department wasn't putting out information, was that it was highly probable that a dirty bomb had been deployed. A dirty bomb had been deployed. And then goes, now I don't know that, I'm just speculating like the rest of us here. Think about the fear that that puts into the community immediately by saying that. Those SMEs can derail a really good messaging strategy very, very quickly. Sorry to interrupt. I never missed the opportunity
No.
to talk about that.
Yep. This is how Eric and I roll. We share a brain. Um, so what does credible messaging look like? What do we want to do? Always talk about the fact that we talk about people first. One of my favorite examples was from the great PIO with Miami Fire, who was kind of managing the Surfside building collapse. And she said that within a couple hours after that Surfside building collapsed, if you recall, it was a condominium that collapsed onto itself. She said, within a day or two, because now we're at blame, the media were asking, well, how much is this going to cost? Are taxes going to go up? Oh, what's the environmental impact because there was supposed to be additional hurricane force winds and stuff coming. And she said, I made a point to keep on reminding people that this was still a search and recovery or search and rescue efforts, putting people first. That's what we care about. If we are in public safety, our number one priority is to take care of people. I already mentioned the talk about what you know, and only when it's fact. I mentioned already, you get yourself what I call in the proverbial biz bag if you start talking about what you think, because there's a very good chance that's not going to be what ends up happening. Software, to try look at, there's all kinds of software out there that will help you identify what's a real image and what isn't. The problem is the malicious actors are two steps ahead of the people that are trying to do this. So do what you can. Geofencing doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of stuff that you can do to try to determine if something is fake, and then you post that on your For the Record site. You need to have that page on your website that says, no, this is incorrect, this is incorrect. Because if you don't have a place on your website that says that, when AI, because if we're using Grok or Chat GPT or Perplexity or the myriad other ones, if they don't see something, if something isn't online in writing, it doesn't exist. So history is what sticks, right? Use your traditional media to set the record straight, and they will, but also make sure you put that out on your platforms, whether it be your own apps, whether it be your own social media, and then ask your people to amplify the truth. You do not have the same people following you as many of your other folks do. So this is where those citizens academies or community academies and the faith-based churches all can be helpful to create that echo chamber for your sounds and what you are saying. This is a huge one. Media, as we've already talked about, they're looking for feelings. Your community's looking for facts. We have to find a way to have a balance there. We want to show our communities that we care, right? That is the emotion that our community needs to know. I am not saying that you get your principal out there sobbing on camera. No. But what I am saying is whoever's on camera, who's ever putting out the messaging, has to show that they're concerned, they're caring, they're empathetic to what is happening. And then we provide the facts. Here's what you need to know. Here's what we're doing. Here's what you need to be doing. And this is what you need to remember. Super important. Eric's going to talk about the actual messaging in a minute, but we are so focused as communicators on messaging, messaging, messaging. We sometimes forget about two other really important things. And those are who's the messenger and what's the medium we're using to put the messages out. Think about that just for a second, because I think if you do, you'll realize a message coming from your chief executive sounds very, very different and will be consumed very, very differently than a PIO. When the tornadoes went through downtown Atlanta, we started with the mayor, the fire chief, the police chief, head of EMS. They did the initial media briefings. And then as the days went down and as we were de-escalating our messaging, the very last day of messaging, it was me as the PIO of the police department and the PIO for the Salvation Army and the Red Cross. So we were actually using who the messengers were to de-escalate the situation. Whoever that messenger is, especially at the outset of the crisis, needs to be someone who's known and trusted. And what's really important about the known part, some of you are in full responsibility of doing all messaging. There's a challenge with that. And I say this all the time. The PIOs shouldn't be better known than your principals, than your CEOs. People need to know who your CEO is. They already need to have built a modicum of trust with that person. So you need to get them out there during the good days and the blue sky days. So when the storm comes, people already know who that is and they already trust them. When it comes to the medium, that also affects the way the message is heard. Marshall McLuhan talks about the medium is the method, is the message. Because the difference between hosting a news conference to announce how many deaths we've had in this destruction and this is how we move forward will be consumed very differently than if you just put out an X post or put something on Facebook. So you need to be very strategic in the way that you think about this. So while we're going to talk about messaging, it's really important that you think about who the messenger is and what's the medium that you're going to use. Eric, I turn that over to you, my friend.
So we're gonna do a really very high level walkthrough of the messaging and how to construct it. The caveat that I want to give you here is that particularly for something like a hurricane coming through, there are so many local variables at play that just taking a standard template of here's what you say during a hurricane isn't going to work for you. Your evacuation routes, your potential flood zone areas, your resources that you have available to you, shelter locations, all of those things are going to be very specific to your community and to your geographic region. So what we want to do here is give you the foundational principles of how you should be constructing those messages. The pyramid here is really, really important. Pyramids are incredibly strong structures, but the one thing that they do really, really well is survive compression forces. And that's what the crisis is going to feel like. It's going to feel like you're being compressed. And so to build that stable foundation of messaging, to be able to do what you need to do for your community, these are the four things that we want you to incorporate. And it starts with you've got to acknowledge the incident. I feel like this entire webinar is Judy and I paddling back and forth about back in my day, but there was a great scene from Naked Gun. Those of you who ever saw that movie of Leslie Nielsen standing in front of the fireworks factory as it's exploding, saying, "Nothing to see here, folks. Go on about your business. Nothing to see here." That just doesn't work. People are so afraid to say that a shooting is a shooting, or that a stabbing is a stabbing, or that whatever it is what it is. It is what it is. Trying to soften the verbiage or pretend that it didn't happen isn't going to help anybody. Acknowledge the incident. Say what it is. Your action messages are critically important. Judy talked about the emotion, right? A couple of times we've brought emotion into this. Facts whisper, emotion screams. Balancing emotions and facts with the media. That acknowledgement of the emotion, and we're going to give you the structure for that, is important here. You've got to punch through the noise with a message that says, yeah, we hear you, we understand the emotions of what you're going through. But in the immediacy of a crisis, people need to know what you're doing and what they need to be doing. Your action messages that you deliver are going to be absolutely paramount. Please don't over reassure. Please don't set artificial timelines and dates. Tell people what's happening in the moment. Tell them what you're doing in the moment. Don't promise that everything is going to be fine tomorrow. Don't promise that everybody's going to be okay. You don't know. Again, we speak about what we know, use facts, so don't over reassure. You do have an opportunity to put things into perspective, though. And that's really, really a great way to be able to sort of ground all of the messaging that you're delivering in something tangible that your community can walk away with. This is what it looks like, taking this pyramid and putting it into action. You're gonna develop a foundation of your messaging that starts with a care message, acknowledging the incident, demonstrating your concern. As Judy said, this doesn't mean that the boss has to come out and cry at the podium. They might, but they don't have to. What you do want to have is a message that resonates, that you get it, right? You're a human being too. You recognize that there are emotions that are taking place with this. People need to hear that. They need to know that you are understanding and empathizing, or at least sympathizing with what they're going through. And it opens up their mind then to be able to hear what you're doing and what they need to know. So those action messages, and you can have, again, up to 3, because 3 is a really easy number and people like things in 3. We like to name organizations with things of 3 because we like our acronyms here. So what you are doing and what you want your community to do. I'm going to say this like 6 times in the next 5 minutes. You're going to get tired of hearing me say it, but I'll say it until I die. What you want your community to do. If you tell someone what you don't want them to do, they're going to do the exact opposite. So tell them what you want them to do. And finally, that perspective message. This is, I don't think water coolers are a thing anymore, but this is the thing that you want people talking about in the days to come. They might not remember what you say as your care message, but they'll remember how you make them feel. They might not remember your action messages point by point, all the things that you're doing, but they're going to remember that you're doing a thing. They know that something is happening. That perspective message is what you want people thinking about 3 days from now. That's the we got this. We're working towards a solution for this. That's that perspective message. So I'm telling you that I care about what's happening. I'm telling you what I'm doing about that thing I told you I care about. I'm telling you what you need to do about that thing that I care about. And here's what I want you to remember in the coming days as we move through this situation. This is the basic framework. As you go through the stages of the hurricane, right? Far off away, it's coming towards you, the spaghetti maps come out, the cone starts to narrow, storm surge starts to rise, the wind starts to come on shore. You're going to be tweaking that message to meet the appropriateness of what you're going through, but it's going to be in this core foundational structure. I'm going the wrong way. So as you put your messaging together, couple of things. Your community needs to know, am I safe? How is this affecting me? What should I do? The media is going to ask you questions that, I'm being very careful here. The media is going to ask you some questions. They're going to ask you things like, who's in charge? What's happening? Why is it happening this way? Who can we blame for the things that are happening? As though you are singularly responsible for a Category 5 hurricane coming ashore. Some of those media questions are important, right? Some of those media questions are going to be fact-based. But what you really need to be focused on is making sure that your community is getting the message that they need to know that they're safe, how they're going to be affected, and what they can be doing. And we talked about that at the very beginning of this, right? Activating that helpfulness, activating the community good, giving them that predictable messaging that resonates with them, that they know and understand what took place. So you can use those media questions that are coming in order to speak to your community, to give them those messages. No one really cares as the houses are being lifted off their foundations who's in charge. They just want to know that somebody's coming to do the rescue. Nobody is in that moment really all that concerned about why the power is down. How come the power failed as 150-mile-an-hour winds are ripping out telephone poles? They want to know where they can go to be safe. That's what you need to have your immediate focus on. As you're constructing your messaging in your crisis pre-plan and in the moment to adapt to the situations on the ground, please speak like a person. Please speak like a person. If a 5-year-old child or your grandmother doesn't know what you're saying because you're using jargon and other inside language to communicate your message, then no one in your community is gonna understand. We talk about this all the time. Average comprehension level of the United States right now sits somewhere at about fifth grade. When they're watching the news, they have about a fifth grade comprehension level. When it's in a crisis, that can drop down as low as first grade comprehension. Sits somewhere around 3, but it can drop as low as first grade comprehension. So you need to use clear, direct words that the average person would use when talking to a friend. Paint a picture for people. I don't know what a 150-mile-an-hour wind looks like, but I know what it looks like when the winds are so strong that roofs are being ripped off of homes, that trees are being picked up and thrown around. I don't know what catastrophic storm surge is. It's hard for me to picture what a wall of water 10 feet high looks like, but I know what it looks like when a house gets ripped off its foundation. What does structural damage in a neighborhood mean? I know that my neighbor's house was destroyed, though. I know what that looks like. Every once in a while during this presentation today, me more than Judy, but I've used the word impact with intention. Try not to use the word impact when you're structuring your message for crisis response, particularly when you're talking about a hurricane with winds that are impacting buildings, picking up debris that are impacting other things and possibly impacting bodies. We would really like you to switch towards affect or effect, situationally dependent. Again, things like infrastructure failure, right? We've had a grid failure. Nobody knows what a grid failure is, but they get that the power is out, roads are blocked, there's no water. These are things people understand. Please, for hurricanes, for every day, for car accidents, for whatever the situation, people do not succumb to their injuries. They do not pass away. They do not go to the great beyond. They do not go to the pearly gates. They die. That's it. People die. That's all you need to say. Anything else that you say feels off in the moment. It feels like you are trying to soften the blow. It confuses people. It takes them out of the actionable information you're trying to convey. People die. That's it. Again, an evacuation order is in place. Tells me nothing. That requires me to go and find if I live in a particular evacuation zone. That requires me to go and find out what roads that I should be traveling in order to evacuate. And while we would like to think that personal responsibility is a thing that everybody readily embraces, we know that's not the case. Tell people what you want them to do. If you live in this community, you need to leave. This is the road that you need to take. Same thing with sheltering in place, particularly during a storm with high winds. That's less valuable than saying stay inside, stay away from windows, stay away from places where shattered glass can injure you. Again, what we're trying to get you to do here is use words that everybody uses, but also to paint that picture. I talked a minute ago about if you tell people what you don't want them to do, they're going to do it. And I use this example all the time. If I put a red button on the wall and I paint "do not push" on it, somebody's going to launch their body at it to see what happens. Instead of telling people what you want them not to do, tell them what you want to do. Tell them how they can take action. Take you right back to what Judy said at the top of this. People want to be helpful in a crisis situation. They want to feel like they have an active role. It gives them something to do with that anxiety that they're experiencing. So instead of saying avoid the area, give them the routes that you want them to take, give them the location you want to go to, and tell them why. People want to know why they're doing a thing. Instead of saying don't, say please do this. I can't provide you that information right now. This is what I can tell you. We're going to get that information. Stay at home. Stay away from windows. Again, we're giving them things that we want them to use. If you say, don't go to Main Street, everybody's going to Main Street. They're going to want to see, why am I not supposed to be here? They're going to want to see. If you say, go to the park on Elm Street because Main Street has a toxic waste spill and you will have three-headed children for the next 60 years, 95% of people are going to go to the park. The other 5%, there's not much we can do about that. And if you couldn't tell, it's here twice. It's really, really important. Instead of saying, yeah, avoid the area, give those alternate routes. Um, there's a reason it's here 3 times. Because if you go through any crisis in the last month, you will continue to see public safety agencies say, avoid the area. Law enforcement activity, avoid the area. It is a giant beacon to come and see what's going on, but it's also not giving anyone anything to do. You want to give people something to do. So, hurricane specific, some cliches that we would like you to avoid. I would prefer public safety officials weren't saying hunker down. It might be resonant to a particular generation, but it's no longer a thing that's going to resonate with the vast majority of your community. It's also overused, and variations of this phrase are overused. We talk about messaging fatigue. We're really trying to be in a position of avoiding messaging fatigue, right? So, storm of the century. I think we've had 10 of those in the last 15 years. You can only have so many storms of the century. It worked the first couple of times, but every storm can't be the storm of the century. Use those paint a picture phrases that we gave you to be able to tell a much more accurate representation of what's going to happen. After the storm, we dodged a bullet here. The number of times I've heard somebody come out and say that, that's great. I'm really glad your community wasn't destroyed. But in the neighboring county that no longer has a recognizable community, that just feels indifferent. It feels marginalizing. Mother Nature's fury. These are all things, by the way, that we pulled out of like actual public safety officials saying over and over and over again. We're anthropomorphizing the storm, and we don't want to do that. We want to provide facts. We want to provide actionable information. Cone of uncertainty. Talk about what the storm is doing. That it could move like the. Every time I hear cone of uncertainty, I think about a poor dog that has just come back from an unfortunate vet visit. Right? That's cone of uncertainty. That's a cone of uncertainty for the dog. People are not dogs. Tell them what's happening. Tell them that the storm path could shift. Total devastation again isn't actionable information. Talk about what's actually taking place in your community. Judy referenced it earlier, right? Boston Strong was super powerful and it was super good. You use it too soon and it minimizes and marginalizes. And when we talked about that people will remember thing after a crisis, what do we want people thinking about? We want them thinking about the fact that we are cognizant of what they're actually experiencing in the moment and that we are working to address that, and here's how we're doing that. So there's a time and a place for that community, insert community strong messaging. But if you do it too quickly, you're going to diminish your overall messaging. And go through these very quick. Brief on facts as you know them. We've talked about this. The caveat here, the way that you do this is leave room for information to change. And you can start every briefing with, look, this is the information we have right now. As it changes, we'll update you. Judy said this a number of times. Again, we're repeating things 3-4 times here because we see them all of the time. We've seen them in our case studies. Don't start with I think. Nobody cares what you think. They want to know what you know. Tweak your messaging so that your cat message is reflective of the circumstances. Have somebody keep a running log. Going to be really, really important in the aftermath. Have somebody keep a running log of what's taking place. Brief on the facts as you know them. Provide those statistics. Analogies if they're helpful. Like the recovery phase, being able to use analogies is can be really, really impactful. It can give something for people to hold on to. But in that pre and during stage, those fact-based, right? Like wind so strong that roofs will be torn off. Super helpful. And this is just always, 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 always defining, never defending. If you're defending, you're losing. This is particularly important post-hurricane when that intense scrutiny is kicked into gear and the media starts coming from you. If you start defending the decisions that you're making, well, we didn't know any better. How could we have possibly been prepared? You're going to be losing. So we're always defining why we did what we did when we did it. Judy's going to walk you through some really impactful things that you can start doing today as soon as we get off this webinar to be able to start setting yourself up for the crisis.
And the best part is that we're going to send you, I feel like I'm doing a commercial. At the end of this webinar, we're going to send you some links that is going to actually help take you to some templates and some other information that will help you with this. So look at, there's a couple things we got to do. We got to make sure that before the crisis that we all are singing out of the same songbook. So this is where partnerships become extraordinarily important. Who are you going to play with during a crisis? And I need you to get out of the head of just public safety. Again, when we were dealing with our tornado, all of a sudden it's like, I didn't know anyone at the Salvation Army. I didn't know anyone at the Red Cross. These were people that I just met. And I was like, man, I wish I would have known you before this thing happened so we could learn your cadence, right? This is also where you can do your plan, your crisis communication plan, both a messaging strategy, what are my cap statements going to be, and operationally. Do we have a place we're going to put together a joint information center? Do we have places that if the floodplain is here and that's where our 911 center is and that's where we were going to have our JIC, oh, that's not good. We've got to be somewhere where the floodplain is a category 5. And if it's a category 5, it's going to be more troublesome, right? And then get together and practice. One of the most troubling things I saw a few years ago was one state decided to do their crisis tabletops and not include their communicators. This is one of Judy's fight like you're the third rhino trying to get on Noah's Ark things that you need to be in that room. Communication plays an extraordinary role in your ability to get through a crisis, survive a crisis with some trust and legitimacy in mind. So again, partnerships, create those relationships, know your government people. Who are those third-party endorsers? Those are the folks that you want to be able to talk to because trust in government's at an all-time low, right? We're looking at about 35, 36%. Who does your community trust? Use those folks that are going to help you. When it comes to those plannings, we talked about this right off the very top. Who are my stakeholders and audiences? My internal people, those people we talked about, who are the people that are going to be affected? Who are people on the outside that can help convey my message, be that echo chamber? And then again, the two plans. Here's my messaging plans. We have a template for that. And operationally, that's something that you're going to have to work on. Operationally, when are you as a communicator going to be advised? What responsibilities do you have? We all understand NIMS and ICS, but do the other people that are playing in the field with you understand that? And then the practice, doing the tabletops, doing the drills, doing the regional ones when you bring in the airport authority, when you bring in the utilities, when you bring in gas companies, all of that becomes important. And after the thing, do a debrief, right? This is where we learn. And I'm a huge fan of doing an internal communications debrief. And then I bring the media in. And I said, what did we do right? What could we have done better? And then we share the same thing. Look at when you guys said this, didn't work out so well. I really wish you would have done this. So the crisis communication manual, and what I love about having one with some pre-prepared, essentially skeleton messaging, is it allows you to think outside the fog of the crisis. Because I can assure you, when you're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to your JIC, you're not thinking straight. When you have these messages created, it's not only allows you the time to think, oh, I can't say avoid the area because Eric told me not to, and I'm not going to say the word impacted, but it allows you to get the approvals. And that becomes a big part if you're in a larger city. Before you release information, it needs to get approved by folks. This can be extraordinarily helpful because if you're a city that needs to get approval from the city manager and the city manager's communications person and then the mayor and then the governor or whatever, you don't have time for that. But when you put the plan together and say, this is what we're going to say in the event of a hurricane, this is kind of the basic. And again, it's a template that needs to be tweaked, right? You cannot put together a communications plan that is going to give you every scenario. What you're doing is you're putting together a skeleton or a Christmas tree that you put different balls on every time something happens. The logistics. This is the operational side of it that you need to be thinking about. You might have a logistics person if you're doing a full NIMS ICS, but think about How am I going to take care of my staff? By the way, Eric and I are both unfortunate, learn this the hard way. Your ability to communicate after 8 to 10 hours is really bad. I've said things when I've been up for 24 hours that I look back on and going, I can't believe I said that. How was I on crack? No, I was not. I just hadn't slept for 24 hours. Understand who are the people that are going to be involved on your team. And if you're a smaller agency and you look at my list that I have there of the who's, like, I don't have that many people, but who else can you draw on? Can you draw on the school's PIO? Can you bring in the PIO from the library service? Who are these folks that might be able to help me that might not necessarily need to be on camera or relating directly to the chief executive, but who are these people that can help? I do strongly suggest that you have strong staff members. If there is a family assistance area, you need to have someone there. In the VIP briefing area, and I say if necessary, this is again a lesson I learned from my friend in Boston. There was so many people that were coming to their operations center that said, I'm an important person, I need to be in here. He said he couldn't do any work. So he took a piece of paper and he printed VIP briefing area, and he took it across the hall and he put a lieutenant at the door, and he says, anytime someone comes with a card, go, oh, you're a VIP, you need to be in the VIP briefing area. And they put some donuts and coffee in there, and they were all happy, and the chief could do his work. So think about that. All right, this is my last, Judy, on a platform. Please stay in your lane. This is so important, and this is part of the planning. The responding public agency, public safety agency, has one set of message. Elected officials have a set of messages. NGOs like the Salvation Army, Red Cross, they have a set of messaging. And it's very, very different. We all saw what happened in New Orleans when we have elected leaderships talking about what's happening from a public safety policing perspective, law enforcement perspective. Here's just like a simple kind of layout of the difference in messaging when it comes to who are the audiences and stakeholders, what type of information should be going out between city and elected officials versus whoever the department is leading the recovery efforts, timing, tone, coordination role. It's very, very different. If you don't practice this, it's not going to work. And you are going to have to bring, and I'm hoping that there's some city PIOs on this webinar as well. You can share this webinar with other people in your city if you're the public safety PIO. This is really important because this is where you're going to maintain and build trust or completely decimate your legitimacy. So we saw what happened in New Orleans. This is just one of literally thousands of posts that were made after that second news briefing. Like, we don't know what's going on. And where is this coming from? So this does come back and bite you in the butt. Eric, I will turn it over to you to wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. We are rounding the bend into the finish line here on this presentation. So I said earlier that there's no way, one, we could do this for like a week straight, and that there's no way to really give you very specific messaging for your community because every single person that's watching this right now or will watch this in the future is representing a very specific community with very specific community needs. But we wanted to at least highlight a couple of local considerations that we think are really important for before, during, and after, right? So know and understand your storm surge and flooding zones. Uh, you, Judy talked about like something as simple as pre-staging the media, right? Where are you going to put them? You also just don't want to be in a position where somebody asks you that question and you don't have access to that information. And then use that messaging, use that knowledge in your briefing and your messagings that you're putting out. Again, we've talked about this before, but with like wind damage and debris, you might live in a community that is has a lot of mobile homes or 1950s, 1960s built homes where the roof construction was very different and might be much more susceptible to a particular type of wind damage. Or you might have a community that lives on canals or has a lot of waterways, right? So being able to use the specificity of the type of damage your community can expect, really important. With power and communication loss, you want to set those expectations early, right? We are a society that now more than ever is dependent on power to get through our daily lives. When I was in Baltimore, what was then Tropical Storm Isabel came through, and it came up the Chesapeake Bay, and it was devastating. Lots of floods, tremendous power outage. We were without power for a week at my house, and you just don't really realize what that's going to do to you until you don't have power for a week. So set those expectations early. Start prepping people for how they can prepare themselves. Same thing with supply chain disruptions, right? Everything from having the right prescriptions in place to make sure that people have gas. You want to message that at a minimum 72 hours. Obviously, you're going to be guided a lot on the particulars of the storm that's coming through, but this is just baseline getting people prepared for this. And with this, message responsibly, right? You're not trying to create a sense of panic. You're not trying to create a sense of the world is ending. You are trying to give people actionable information of things that they can do to be a helpful member of your community. Pepper your messaging with those health and safety concerns. It happens every storm. People end up dying as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning. Contaminated water gets people really sick. Talk to your relevant health authorities well in advance of a storm. Find out what those specific message points should be and start getting those out. Again, know your evacuation zones. Don't send people into danger. That's happened. Don't send people into danger. And as much as possible, be specific. The more general the language that you use, the more likely people are to start tuning that out. If you are in a situation where there is total destruction, and we've seen this, right? Entire communities get wiped out. Some things that you're going to want to think about both before and during, because it's going to change the nature of your communications, right? We talked about this before with safe generator use and things like that, but how are you actually going to communicate if power fails over multiple days and people can't charge their cell phones anymore? So thinking about, hey, when your cell phone dies, here's a way that you can continue to get information from us, right? Is it a radio? Are there centers people can go to? Those water unsafe boiling notices, right? You want to repeat those often because your healthcare facilities are already going to be overwhelmed. The last thing that you need is an additional people coming in with that are really, really sick, right? We've talked about this ad nauseum, and we'll continue until I have no more breath in my lungs. With roads blocked, clarifying where you want them to go, what you want them to do, using that active language. Judy has her third rhinoceros. This is the hill I choose to die on. Please tell people what you want them to do. Those information gaps again, right? Cell phone service is going to go down. It's going to take a while for them to come in and put those emergency towers into place. Your local radio stations might be wiped out. So be thinking about all the ways that you have available to you to get information out. We had a situation in Baltimore where a tornado came through and it took out a bunch of our repeaters, and we actually had one of those civil defense network teams that we tapped into that had ham radios, and we were using ham radios to communicate, right? Get creative in your ability to get those messages out, because over a long period of time you're going to have decreased comms. When you move into that repair, rebuild, recovery phase, we say this all the time, PIOs are not just communicators, they're strategic advisors. A lot of the recovery messaging is going to be handled by your elected officials. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be at the table thinking through that messaging with them, right? Because we want to make sure that messaging remains safety first. We want to acknowledge that there's going to be a mental health toll. That's perfectly normal in these types of situations. We want to start getting those resources out to our community. Talking about what those volunteer organizations that are coming in, how people can help. Be transparent in your updates. Talk about the thing that is. Don't set those artificial timelines. Credibility trumps optimism here. The more trusted you are, the more believable you are, the more people will have their own sense of optimism because they know that something's actually taking place that's going to help them. Let your elected leaders, the bosses, the heads of the organizations, really take the lead on that resilience messaging and driving that through. This is part of that de-escalation methodology where you become more the fact deliverer and the head of your organization, the head of your community becomes that conveyor of hope. And just a little note here, recovery is as much about restoring hope as it is about the bricks and mortar of your community. You can lay the foundations for hope from day one in how you do your messaging. If you demonstrate from the first moment that a warning is issued that you're credible, that you're providing that good information, that you've been thinking through how to really effectively get information out to your community, you can be that source of hope through your credibility. And the way that you do that from jump is that practice, right? Practice with your local jurisdictions. Rehearse the messaging that you're getting out. Coordinate. Don't make it up as you go along. You've got the time now. Take it and use it to prepare how you're going to respond in the crisis. Think about, as Judy said, that messenger, the medium that you're getting it out there, how you're using that effectively to communicate who is going to be the face of these things. Please don't wait until it's too late. It's never too early to start messaging and getting things out. Judy, do you think it's important that people use action words and tell people what you want them to do?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good thing. We should
I,
always talk about action words.
I wish I
Action
had talked about
words.
that more, so I threw that
Yeah.
bullet in here just in case. Um, Speak like a person. Use that plain language. Avoid the jargon. Avoid the colloquialisms. Speak like you're talking to a third grader or to an elderly person. Stay in your lane, as Judy said. Talk about what you're supposed to be talking about. Communicate and coordinate with your surrounding jurisdictions. Think through what those repair, rebuild, recovery efforts are going to look like. And if nothing else, start drafting your crisis communication manual today. You will put a lot of time and effort into writing them, and it might sit on a shelf for years. But the day that it's needed, you're going to be so grateful that it's there. That is, as Judy said, you've got that skeleton of the Christmas tree that you can just start decorating with the appropriate ornaments when the time has come. Um, Thank you.
Question? Do we have questions?
Yeah, we do, and I'm going to get to those in a second. I want to say just thank you for being here with us. I know that we know you took an hour and a half out of your day to listen to us talk to our computer screens, and we're really appreciative because this matters. Community Communities can go through some devastating incidents. I've lived through them. A lot of you have. Judy certainly has. How you communicate during those moments really, really matters. And so that you're taking the time out of your day to come and attend something like this speaks to your commitment to your community. Don't ever let go of that. Continue to be that good advocate for your community through the communication that you put out there. With that, I do want to move into our question and answer section. And there we go. I see two. If you have questions that we can answer for you, please drop them in. Now is the time. We've built in time to be able to answer those questions for you, and we'd love to be able to do that. I've got one here that says, I live in Pinellas County, and their last major hurricane they experienced was in 1921. Their last storm in 2024 was a challenge, and they did a great job handling the situation step by step. That's awesome to hear. That's what we want to hear. Um, uh, when everything feels chaotic, what helps keep you grounded? I know this varies for everyone, but given your backgrounds, I think this would be insightful for fellow communicators. Um, Judy, you want to take that first, and I'll dive into that a little bit after.
I'm not sure I was ever grounded when the really bad things were happening. But I will say this, and we actually say it in the guide that we'll give you a link to. Knowing that it will end. I know that sounds silly, but when you are absolutely in the thick of it, a lot of the ways that I got through it is like, this will end. If I do the right things, this will end. But I will tell you, one of the most important things as a communicator, and a lot of times, look at bosses, we're in public safety, we're in the business of dealing with horrible things. But I'll just go back to when that tornado came through downtown Atlanta, because tornadoes typically don't go through a downtown area. During two SEC basketball games and a NBA basketball, and it was a mess. The call that I got from our major in charge of operations at the time, I'll never forget. It was laced with expletives, and it was simply, I'll leave the expletives out, but all I got when I picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Major, what's up?" was hurricane, downtown, get here, expletive. And he hung up. So understanding that sometimes you have to really, I mean, it's like the duck, the feet are going underneath, but the top looks calm. I know when I got there, I was freaking out. And I don't know how I know how we got stuck with the lead, because we had the most people. Police department should not have been leading tornado recovery efforts, but we were stuck with it because of that. And it was a little bit of fake it till you make it. And then it went to, I've got to be the one that's calm because there's a lot of craziness going on. In fact, when we walked out of I used to call it the Barbie camper, the operational center that we were working in, when the sun came up, the guy driving it said, get out of the truck now. And we're like, we're in the middle of writing a news release. The mayor's here. Get out of the truck. We walk out of the truck and look up, and there's a giant billboard ready to fall on our command vehicle. We're like, oh, well, not good. So honestly, my only thing, and Eric, I hope you have something better, was kind of fake it till you make it, and know that it's going to end. And having really good people you can call that are outside the fog of the crisis. I wish I could have phoned Eric back then, but I didn't know him. But I know when I've gone through some bad things, I've phoned other people that were 5 states away, and I would say, what are you seeing? What am I not seeing? And the support amongst communicators is extraordinary. You are not in this alone.
Yeah, you stole my favorite one, um, because we share a brain. That was going to be my first. Is you've got to talk to people who are not in it. You have to make that an intentional point. I don't care if you go and hide in a bathroom stall. If you find a I don't care what you got to do. You've got to talk to people who know what they're talking about and who aren't in it with you, who are watching it from the outside. In Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just a magnet for destruction. I don't know. We had an earthquake, a tornado, a derecho, which I didn't even know what that was until it hit us, and then the riot. And they were all a little different, and that's on top of like just the normal chaos that was Baltimore on any given day. 40 officers arrested in one day, that sort of thing. Um, the riot, though, was the longest. It was 35 days that we were in that state of 18, 19-hour days of emergency. And I called Judy twice a day, every single day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. What am I not seeing? What is it that I've missed? What do I need to say that I'm not? What am I not doing well that I should be doing well? And that was invaluable because you can't see it all. You can't have eyes on everything. You do need that outside perspective. Two other things that I recommend for everybody to help keep you grounded. The crisis is going to feel chaotic. It is going to feel like every day somebody is moving the goalpost on you. It will feel like there is no end in sight. Even though it will end, it's going to feel like it won't. Find a routine. Find something that you can anchor yourself to. Even if it's something as simple as at 10 o'clock and at 2 o'clock, I'm going to draft updates for the media that we're going to host somewhere. Or even if it's at like 11:30, I'm going to stand up and stretch. Finding those little moments of routine that you can control help you to put everything else into perspective. It's the one thing that you can control in a sea where you just feel like you're being pulled all the way around. And then the last piece of staying grounded is try, and this is going to be hard, try to find as much sleep as you can. Try to find moments to sleep when you can sleep. And it's hard, but one, you will think better. You really will. You'll be able to put things into perspective much better. The longer you are sleep deprived, the harder and harder it gets. And the second part of that is the longer you are sleep deprived, the more damage you are doing to your body, the more physical harm you are bringing to yourself. And that has complications down the line. So if you can find 20 minutes to take a power nap, the world is not going to fall apart in 20 minutes. But your ability to effectively message information that might save lives uh, may be vastly improved by that 20-minute nap. So find those moments where you can sleep, find those moments of routine, find that person that you can trust and that you can call. Um, Another question here. Unfortunately, our department does not have a crisis communication plan. Is there a guideline to go by? I wish I could say that you were the only department in that position. You are not. This is very, very common, so please don't feel alone. Judy?
Oh, do I need to say it again? You're
Yeah.
going to be getting an email after this webinar with a link to a guide that Eric and I put together with two other very smart friends. That really is a download of brain, and it is called, guess what? Strategic Communications for Law Enforcement Executives. But it's not just for law enforcement executives. That guide will give you a template, examples, and the background of how to write a crisis communications guide, how to write a communications guide, a template to use on interviews, interview templates using the CAP statements, and also how to write a tactical communications plan. There's a ton of information in there. We downloaded our brains. I can now retire and go
Oh, you
walk with bears. And that's all going to be there. It's free. It's on the Department of Justice's website, the COPS office website under resources. We will send you the link if you watch this webinar, and it's going to be very, very helpful. And the other thing is, and I'll be the first one to say this, nowadays you actually can, with the aid of, I did not say do not let AI do it for you, but with the help of AI, think of AI like your intern, you can actually do these a little bit quicker because you're not going to be able to write a plan in half a day because your mind will go crazy. Because one of the things you have to do is you think about what are all the potential crises of our agency. And most agencies will have, the one I did for the NYPD had under under 40, 37, I think it was. And we still missed one because when the commissioner sent me a text saying, "Where's the page in the crisis manual about pandemics?" Yeah, didn't think about that one. So, but this will be very helpful. It will help you. It'll give you the guide. It will give you the template, and hopefully that will be helpful. And obviously, as you see on the screen right now, if you want a quick conversation with Eric to help give you some guidance on that, he's willing to do that as well.
Hey, thanks, Judy. Thanks
Did you
for.
like that?
I did. It saves me from having to do that promotion at the end. I want to say something about AI really quick though. I love AI. I think it's fascinating. It's a phenomenal research tool. It's a phenomenal thought partner. If
Mhm.
you are using AI to draft and then deliver messaging, routine, news releases, cap statements, whatever, stop it, please. There, please stop. AI is a phenomenal. All language learning models are phenomenal. The problem is that they're learning models, right? And so they're not going to know your specific community, and they're not going to understand necessarily all the word choices that they're using. And so you might end up putting out a message that says kids in it, and in a community where that word in and of itself is very offensive, that people want to hear little people referred to as children, not kids, right? AI doesn't know that. It doesn't know the norms of your community. And we're already seeing examples of PIOs, actual public safety PIOs using ChatGPT to draft their messages and just wholesale copying and pasting and leaving the ChatGPT prompt at the bottom of it. Please don't do that. I have zero problem with using AI as a thought partner, particularly in communications. It's a really, really valuable tool. It is a
Yeah.
tool, it is not a solution.
So that's why I say, would you put out a news release that an intern just said, you say to your intern, can you write a news release about that? Would you just put that out without looking at it, without proofreading it, without, no, you wouldn't. AI is your intern that is green behind the ears. So please, I love it. I use it. And by the way, also your chat GPT, and if each one of you, if you have an account, it will learn how you speak. Most of you, a lot of you are preparing messaging for your principals. They don't talk like you talk. So you're gonna have to understand. You're gonna understand their cadence, their words that they use. That's what a good communicator does. But I agree with Eric. It is an extraordinary tool, but it is a tool. It is an intern.
That was the last of the questions that were in the chat. Just give it another minute in case anyone else has any other questions that they'd like to ask. We are here. We would be happy to answer them. Having said that, I know it's the middle of everybody's day. I know that we're walking through everybody's lunch hour, and I'm sure people are very hungry. So if there are no other questions, on behalf of Christina and Mike from our team, who are invaluable, I mean, just heroic rock stars behind the scenes in helping this come to fruition, and all of you for taking the time out of your day to participate in this with us. Judy and I are deeply appreciative. We do see it as a privilege and a responsibility to be able to have these conversations. And we're deeply indebted to you for what you're doing right now for your communities, to be able to message with them and to help keep them safe. Judy, the closing words are yours.
Oh, I thought it was a great way to close. I'll just echo what Eric said. Thank you so much for what you do. We know it's thankless, and you are the strategy behind the bosses that are out there either getting the accolades or the tomatoes thrown at them. Take that responsibility seriously, and we continue to thank you for what you do, and remain safe. And just know that Eric and I will be watching all the news conferences on TV.
And with that, you'll be getting some emails from us with those links at the conclusion of this. You're going to be invited to participate in a survey about your thoughts about this. It's completely anonymous. We would love to get your feedback on today's presentation. And with that, thank you so very much for being here and being a part of this. And we'll hope to see you all again soon.